All right, the time is now 6:30. Members of the Public Works Committee who are present, Don, Charles, Kim, and Dave. A quorum of 4 is present. Don, please keep your camera on. You are our quorum. I call the meeting of the Public Works Committee to order. With one brief announcement, at 7:30 p.m., we will enter a 5-minute recess for members to attend to personal needs. First item on the agenda, minutes of the 12/9/2024 Public Works Committee meeting jointly with the Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Transit Committee. Are there any corrections or amendments? Hearing none, I accept the minutes as accurate. Item 2, the minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting from 12/9/2024. Are there any corrections from members present? Hearing none, I accept the minutes as accurate. Item 3, Franklin Ave reconstruction final design 24-122. Sean, if you could please walk us through your memo.
Sure. So, and Dan Perry's on the Zoom call tonight, and Gary Wazik is with us, both from the design team at Veerbicker. And you'll remember where we sort of last left this. The committee had asked, oh, hi, Carrie. Sorry, let me just mark you in.
Sure.
Before I continue.
Thank you.
So where we had left it is the city had asked Veerbicker to look into raised pedestrian crosswalks at the approaches of Franklin Avenue to Park Lawn Place, Park Street, and Branch Street. So those 5 approaches. And they looked into that, and with the results being, the short answer being that we could build 2 of those without significant flooding concerns. Because when the storm sewer becomes overwhelmed, we need an overland flow route, and it would not be advisable to put them in other than at the east leg of Park Street and the west leg of Branch Street. But because that didn't seem to meet the goal of what the city had asked for these 5 locations on their own volition, they went ahead and also did a look at what it would take to put in curb bump outs at those 5 spots. And that would be feasible. They each have roughly the same cost. So one option would be give or take $120,000 to do. The other option would be about $110,000 to do. So this is 5 bump outs or 2 raised crosswalks. And that's probably the major option. And then Dan laid out in a separate memo that we're looking at bidding some different sewer restoration options. The sanitary sewer in this portion of the street is relatively poor condition. Usually there's a crack here or there. This feels like it's a fair amount of work that has to get done with this project. So we're looking at several bid alternates with varying degrees of cost and level of effort and associated recommendation. So what's really before us tonight is to approve the final design for bidding. We want to get this out for bid with either just maintaining existing crosswalks as they are, or if we think we have a pedestrian problem on the order of $110,000 or $120,000, and if we think one of these things will address that problem, to incorporate design modifications for some or all of the 5 crosswalks that had been looked at.
So, Carrie, you're our liaison on Ped Bike and Transit. Has this come up in any of your recent meetings?
Yes, so I believe Public Works Committee, right, referred this to the Pedestrian Bicycle and Transit Committee. And that's where this like recommendation came from, in terms of like the 5 crosswalks to make sure there was a raised crosswalks for visibility of pedestrians at the intersection. So I would believe it was number 2.
Yeah, we looked into 5 raised crosswalks, 3 of which couldn't safely be built. And the other 2 that could, but then the question became, well, does 2 meet the city's goal, desire? Or not? I don't know.
Is there a visual, Sean, that you could show like where those would be then? So it said Park Street and
Exactly. So it'd be at the east side of Park Street. So it'd be at this east side of Park Street and then also at the west side of Park Street. That we actually could build those, but not at Park Lawn Place or the west side of Park Street.
So they're pretty far apart.
Well, yes.
I do think there is some value to increasing pedestrian visibility where Franklin meets Branch, because the elementary school is directly across the street from that. Like right across Branch
Yeah.
Street is Sauk Trail Elementary School.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a feel for how many people cross this leg of this street in a school sense,
As opposed to Maywood.
right? Someplace else. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't. I mean, at the end of the day, most people are crossing Branch Street. I don't know how many are crossing Franklin Avenue at Branch Street.
Yeah, I think the crossing guard is at the corner of Branch and Maywood.
Yeah, there's a crossing guard here for school children.
if you look though, like there is a crosswalk right at, sorry, is it okay if I speak? So were you?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm just looking at the Google map and like, so there's the crosswalk going to the school, it is right there at Franklin and Branch, right? Like you mentioned. So it does make sense to me to have like a raised crosswalk there. I think that because people are walking from the neighborhood over and then they're being, if you're walking on whatever side of the street, what would that be? On the opposite of where the crosswalk is, you do need to cross Franklin in order to get to the Branch. Because there's a pedestrian island there too. Do you know what I'm saying? And on Branch Street, there's a pedestrian island.
Yep.
So I would agree that if at least to install one there, I think the idea was to have like a consistent raised crosswalks throughout that corridor. So if we're not able to do that, I don't know if it makes as much sense at the other location, which was Park.
East side of Park. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll zoom in a bit here maybe and I realize it's not entirely on screen, but so then the discussion would be whether to raise this crosswalk and do the storm sewer work necessary to support that. And then there's a crosswalk here, that's the one I think you were referencing.
Yeah, that's what I was referencing, yes. So it's like we're trying to funnel pedestrians to that crosswalk, right? Because that's where the pedestrian island is.
Yeah, or to the north where the crossing guard is. I don't know how many children cross here and If so, whether they're coming from the north side of the street or the south side of the street, I just don't know. You
I
know, if
doubt that they're walking up to the cross guard though, right? Like I think that's the thing. People are gonna take the shortest path. So if they're coming from that side of the neighborhood, they're probably crossing there.
they might be, yeah.
How, so Sean, if we did one raised crosswalk there, how much would that, do we have an estimate for that cost?
Don't know offhand.
Sean,
we are analyzing it that way. Do you? Yeah.
I can answer that one. At that intersection's about 50,000 for that one.
Do we have any guidance as to how much of a visibility benefit we would get from the curb bump outs?
I don't know that it's visibility as much as it is reduced crossing distance, you know, and sometimes approaching drivers get this sense like, oh, the road's narrower. You know, my options for where to position my vehicle become constrained.
Okay.
And so I think both you get a little bit of driver awareness. I don't want to drive into this curb, right? But also pedestrians just don't have as much conflict zone to gauge and cross. Now, granted, this is stop controlled, so it's not like people should be rolling through here anyway. But yeah, I think that's its primary point. In the meantime, it makes drainage in a flat area a little bit goofy. And I know our plows have had some issues finding them with a blade instead of not, but that's just part of the deal.
Plows do add a little more wear and tear to the raised crosswalk and the plow itself.
Well, a bump out is what we were talking about.
Oh,
They're following along the curb line.
Yeah.
They're trying to sweep out, but it's not surgery. Yeah,
With a plow.
exactly, right. It runs around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit. Oh, Don, are you trying to raise your hand?
I am.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I'm just curious, is there a problem here? I mean, Franklin is a stop control to get onto Branch Street. If there's school in session, there's kids everywhere at that intersection. I mean, I'm just curious what, you know, they raised crosswalk for visibility, and yet I'm just curious, is it a problem?
I don't know of a specific problem. It hasn't been raised as a specific issue of concern in the past. I think the way it was talked about at our joint meeting with Ped Bike Transit in early December was to pursue sort of a general goal of trying to get raised crosswalks on the approaches to collector streets
Okay,
across the board.
all right, well then this would qualify, obviously, so, okay.
Yeah, I think Don, part of it is just again to make sure that we're implementing our, you know, the goals of the Complete Streets program, right? Which is really to kind of indicate that roads are not just for cars, but for pedestrians, cycle, you know, so this is part of that, is just kind of bringing more safety and awareness to pedestrians. So even if there's not an issue, it's hopefully preventative in a lot of ways too. So I think that was part of the idea behind it.
Sure, I understand implementing their desires, and that's fine, so, okay. Then I think the raised crosswalk versus the curb bump out would be better, because it would be more direct at what they want.
I agree with that, especially in this location here. I don't think the bump out curbs would meet the intent as much.
Yeah, the bump out curbs are more of a visual cue for drivers. and not necessarily as much of a pedestrian visibility thing. So I think I am leaning towards the raised crosswalk at that intersection at least as well.
Yeah.
Don't know if the other one necessarily meets the same objective. Are we on a collector there or
Park
Park.
Lawn and Branch are all
collectors? Yeah, so I guess it does.
It does, but it's only on one side, which is questionable, I guess.
I agree with that. I think that's where it's like it meets the intent, but then it's not providing that consistency. So it seems, I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that. But just having on one side doesn't seem to really meet. And Sean, can you explain to me again why it's not on, why we can do it on both sides?
Sure. Let me just buzz down to, so at Park Lawn Play. I don't know if this is showing up really great on your screen, but there's this sort of cyan/blue line that shows effectively what happens to drainage trapped between these walls. You know, and to some degree, even if we try to pick that up with storm sewer, at some point, storm sewer reaches capacity and water needs to find an overland flow route to get out of these areas. So we would expect this intersection to be periodically inundated. Being a collector street, I can't recommend that.
Got it.
So it seems like there might be a fourth option, which is we recommend the one raised crosswalk at Branch near the elementary school, because that's a collector street near a school. And we don't see a clear benefit to spending the extra 70,000, was it, for the
Give or take.
for the park in Franklin Avenue, in terms of aligning our budget, the complete streets policy, and pedestrian visibility.
I'd agree with that.
So I'll just add, I mean, this is a pretty small bubble of sort of inundated area when, you know, stormwater's trying to flow through here, but we've effectively blocked it off. It's intended to go into the storm sewer, but when the storm sewer is full, surcharged, we're gonna get a little bit of the road underwater. If people are approaching a stop condition, and if they know it's been raining heavy and they're, you know, operating near the center line, that's maybe not so bad.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we add the raised crosswalk at Branch Street.
I'll second.
Right, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion?
Question, can we add that following this motion or including with this motion that we approve the plans as submitted for bidding? With this add?
And it would be handy, yeah, if we just acknowledge that maybe even just in one motion that we're approving the plans for bidding with the addition in the bid package of this one raised crosswalk.
Okay,
I
I'd
can-
like to do that, but Carrie, do you agree?
Yeah, I can make that, can I make that amendment to the motion?
Yeah,
Could I ask what Sean, one thing before you go? Sorry. Will this be an alternate in the bid, or would this be in the design as like, you know, build it like this?
I'm hearing bid, Dan, unless somebody wants to see this as an alternate that could be considered separately.
think that's necessary.
I don't think so. I don't know what
Okay.
you, everyone else feels, but it seems like we should just bid it as with this in the design.
See, when it gets there. we'll
I think
deliberate.
that's fair enough. Based on the most recent opinion of probable construction costs that Dan put together for us, we should be able to buy this one without requiring additional money if bids come in favor.
Really boils down to budget.
All right.
Okay, do you,
Thank you.
If you want, if
Should I
you want
restate?
comments,
Sean,
I think that's fine. So we're talking about approval of the plans for bidding with the addition of this one raised crosswalk in the base bid.
my only concern would be, this. When it works its way up to the next step from a budgetary standpoint, what if someone goes, I don't know, how are we looking from a budgetary standpoint to absorb this?
Well, that's what I was just saying. The
Yeah.
most recent cost estimate for construction, if the bids come in favorably, would allow us to build this one without requesting additional funding.
Okay, then let's let it go the way it is. Yep, no alternates needed, I'd say.
okay,
What do you think,
I'd agree.
fellow Alder?
all right, so yeah, included in the base bid,
do you
Okay.
want me to restate the motion?
please.
Okay. Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the final design with the addition of adding a raised crosswalk at Branch Street. Is there anything else that you need to add to that?
Nope, I think that'll do.
Okay,
And Don, you wish to remain on as second?
Yes, I do. That's fine.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
I,
Aye.
bye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you all. Your design work.
Well, sure, Gary, have Dan do all the work.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Appreciate
it. We'll get it ready for bids.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary.
You have a good night. Stay warm.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 4, Pheasant Crossing preliminary plat street name. If you are here to make a public comment on this item, if you're in person, just raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand function because not all of your faces appear on the screen, and not all of your speech blocks do. So if you use the raise hand function, that's just a lot easier for me as chair to see. When you're called, if your full name is not displayed, please just say your full name to make it easy for Sean. And
And I may need spelling. In the case of V30, my Zoom report is gonna come back with exactly that, so I may need spelling.
And the way we're gonna do this is, Sean, if you could walk us through your memo and that, and then we'll open it for a public comment from the public present.
Sure. Well, and boy, by memo, it's really just an email that I had written in response to a request for consideration. And staff have addressed this issue a couple of times from different angles to consider renaming part of what we had envisioned and planned as Graver Road as it heads east through this development area over to High Road. But we've been opposed to that at the staff level, largely because, well, for two reasons. One, Ziegler is already a used name in the geographic area set up in our ordinance. So that's something that council already set up and endorsed, and it would take a waiver of the ordinance to allow it. But two, it can lead to confusion. And so looking at it from those two perspectives, I had already told the developer previously, no, let's find something that's different and not already in use and isn't likely to lead to confusion. But Graber Road, our expectation was, would be continuous from Parmenter Street to High Road. And so that's a different issue, a slightly different issue. So one is road naming of Graber Road, what we're considering Graber Road, including its extension. And the second issue is, could the name Ziegler be used someplace else within, well, frankly, the city is the end of our jurisdiction, but it's kind of two requests in one, if that makes sense. So kind of at high level, part of what I looked up in the ordinance is we have listed, it looks to me like 7 zip codes. We used to just say the greater metropolitan area. Nobody knew exactly what that meant, but we just always used Dane County then. And that more recently got confined to just 7 zip codes to say, let's pull that area in a little bit, our area of concern for duplication. And Ziegler's used in a couple of communities near here, as well as one active farm that's just kind of apparently known as the Ziegler Farm on Church Road, just west of here. So that's the perspective of just trying to avoid what we hope is, we hope to avoid confusion. If somebody's a little bit flustered, not exactly sure where they are, maybe a visitor, the worst that would happen is they would just say Ziegler something and the call gets dropped. Well, that could be a lot of places. Then the second issue is just sort of continuity and expectation of a street name between major streets. So the city could, without ruffling, too many feathers of existing people, just change the name of Graber Road starting at Lynn Street. I mean, that's something the city could do, and it wouldn't affect anybody that's got an address currently. One of the issues is, just of wayfinding. So when somebody's visiting, driving around, whatever, they're approaching from Parmenter Street or High Road, and they may not know to turn on a street that has a different name than the one they want to get to, even though it's the same street. So if they're trying to turn off of Parmenter Street and get over to Ziegler Family Farm Road, they might not know to turn on Graber Road to get there, and vice versa. If they're trying to get to Graber Road to go to Non's Flooring or something, they might not know to turn off of High Road at Ziegler Family Farm Road, and it just becomes Graber Road. So there's that expectation issue too. Just to be clear and upfront, I'm not in favor of either of these proposals, but I can understand if the city is. We have this appeal process to go through the Public Works Committee to the Common Council to say, we appreciate your efforts, Sean, but here's what we're doing. So that's where we're at in a nutshell.
Okay, so if you have a public comment that you'd like to make and you're remote, please use the raise hand function. I'm going to begin with the people who are here in person, just so I'm not splitting my head both ways. So. Yeah, come on, grab a seat.
You'll be more visible.
Yes.
Well, I guess I see it as 2 separate issues.
Oh, and if you could please state your name for.
Greg Ziegler,
Thank you.
and I'm representing myself and my siblings. were the kids of Leonard and Ruth Ziegler, who owned the farm where the Pheasant Crossing subdivision is going to go. And like I said, I think it's two separate issues. One, we'd like to see in the subdivision less of a connotation of an industrial type name like Graber Road. I mean, Graber's has been there for quite a few years, I think, since the 60s. And I can see where the chief's kind of tongue-in-cheek suggestion to rename the whole road would be challenging. Because when I did the research, there's already 3 businesses that use Graber Road. But I was going to suggest that at the Lynn Street intersection, that's where the new name into the subdivision would be changed. And I think there'd be 2 purposes for that. One being that we get a less industrial connotation to the street name, as well as I think you're going to run into trouble with having a sweeping curve like you do in the existing preliminary plat for Graber Road, because it is a very nice swooping curve, and I think it's going to encourage speeding, which I'm sure the neighborhood would not be appreciative of. And I think it's going to end up being a major commuter line from all the commuters from Wanakee and north. Greenbrier Road already is very problematic in that vein. And the city and town of Springfield has been working pretty diligently over a number of years to try to get commuters off that road. And I think once you succeed in getting them off that road, having another street that's going to be a throughway to Parmenter Street, which links up to very easily links up to Highway 12, you're going to see quite a bit of commuter traffic through there. So by having the either, if you really want to keep the curve, by putting signs basically with arrows saying, well, this is Graber Road to the west, and this is Ziegler Farm Road, or Ziegler Family Farm Road to the west, that should pretty clearly let people know which direction or where they're going. But because of the concern about speeding and the increased commuter traffic, I think another option is to extend or at the intersection of Graber and Lynn to have more of a perpendicular or more of a tight turn, so that it would discourage speeding and people just trying to commute through the neighborhood.
Well, and I'll caution, the committee really is talking about street naming. That was the noticed agenda issue, not road alignment or platting. So the curves are off the discussion tonight. We can talk about that at some future meeting, but not today. I apologize, Greg. When I put this on the agenda last Thursday, I I hadn't received this morning's email about, well, maybe we could move the road around. It was just about road naming as of last Thursday when I noticed it. So the public wouldn't have had opportunity to know that there's also interest in maybe changing the road itself. So that we cannot talk about.
Oh, okay. Can that be discussed at another?
A future meeting, that could be talked about.
Yeah, we can put that on the agenda for a future meeting. I think if, depending on if it's warranted or not. So.
Well, then, as far as the naming consideration, there are not that many houses on all the Ziegler roads, to be quite candid. Presently, there are only 13 houses on all those different Ziegler designations, which would lead you to believe that the chances of getting a call from any one of those would be pretty low. And then when you add on to that, the situation of there might be an odd situation here and there where somebody would get cut off and only say Ziegler or, some other scenarios, the likelihood is extremely low. And I guess the reason that we wanted to name one of the streets in the subdivision, the Ziegler family Farm Road, was our great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather came to the Middleton area and bought our farm, and must have been quite a bit of other acreage in 1866. And so the Ziegler families have been part of the city of Middleton, or the village of Middleton, for a long, long time. And I think it would be nice for the city to acknowledge that commitment that the Ziegler families have given to the city by using Ziegler in a street name. And I would think that having Ziegler Family Farm Road would be sufficient enough to make sure that people aren't getting confused between the different Ziegler designations. Because all the other ones just have drive or lane or road or something along that line. And if it would make a difference, I would suggest having Johann Ziegler Family Farm Road. And then this was something that actually Viridian had come up with, was Ziegler Farm Road. And we really liked it, and we were kind of perplexed that all of a sudden that was gone and we didn't hear why. And I understand, where the emergency people are coming from, but the emergency staff are very well educated and smart people. And I would think that they would be able to discern between the different Ziegler designations. And especially since our suggestion is quite a bit different than the other ones. So having so few homes would even call, it just seems like it would be reasonable to have an exception.
Now, if you are here remotely and you would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. All right, Stephen Wunsch, EMS Chief, you are first in line.
Great, yeah, I certainly have been following all the questions that have come out and I can appreciate the sentiment behind, you know, the move to put the names of the streets, in conjunction with the development. I just want to offer kind of a little reality check. And kind of some of the latest comments, even now, one more, of potentially putting a name to a street with 5 separate words in it. Johann Ziegler Family Farm Road. That's pretty much unheard of. That's a lot of characters put on a map. Even our devices that display addresses inside of our emergency vehicles don't have the capacity to lay that much information in a limited screen space. So I would, you know, question even that is quite a bit. But just kind of a reality. This isn't a question of, you know, intelligence of responders to, you know, navigate. It's really about the callers. And before any resources can even be dispatched, the 911 centers go through a process, what's called address verification. And when someone gives a name of any street, when that gets entered by what's called the call taker, every street in the entire county GIS database with that portion of the name comes before the call taker. So just saying the word Ziegler now, in just these limited 6 or zip codes here listed, come up with 6 possibilities. And if you even take that even farther beyond the border countywide, there, I don't know if there's more than that. But from that point, if the person can't be exactly clear where they're at, they have to try to discern between these municipalities. Sometimes caller ID can help with that, in other cases not. And I hate to be the reality check person. Many people, even if they know their address, they don't know the municipality they live in. I can't tell you how many people you know, live in the rural areas and they'll just say, I live in Middleton, when they're in the town of Springfield or town of Westport or whatever it might be. They kind of pick the local, you know, biggest community, and that's where they think they live. So that becomes problematic when trying to sort things out. And to the point of, remember, people who are calling are not having a casual conversation. They're generally under duress. They're panicking. They are, you know, asking for help. Sometimes even getting an address of any kind is very, very difficult. So we have learned through the years, and we've had periodic conversations about things that we have brought up when we have had addressing problems. And many times they trace back to when streets were originally named. And unfortunately, once those get brought to the attention, and, you know, Sean can remember, you know, we had some issues off Old Middleton Road, and some of the, you know, street names and numbering over there. And unfortunately, once people get used to something, changing and fixing it down the road is darn near impossible. So the opportunity to try and avoid problems comes up front. And while I can appreciate the sentiment, and my comment about changing the entire road name was not a tongue in cheek. It was, I'm very serious about that. That if you have a contiguous street that runs, you know, in particularly of the size of this, where, you know, you get a lot of small neighborhood streets that collect into them, changing that to remain consistent from one end to the other is the easiest navigational system that we can do. fractioning something in the middle of the through street is just illogical and not something we like to see. So if you're gonna, change the name, change it from one terminus to the other. And I don't know if there's other ways to give recognition, to the Ziegler family. I don't know if there's parkland that's going to be in the subdivision and you can name a park after, the family or something, but I just am not a fan of, creating a potential problem down the road. And regardless if there's only 13 houses or whatever we're going to add in this particular street, another, 20 houses, we don't do things based on statistics. In other words, if it seems like low probability, then we're going to let this one slide. It's if you're the one with the emergency, whenever that is, maybe once every 10 years, that's once too many. So that's all I have to offer.
Thank you, Stephen. Alder Haniro, you were next in line.
Thank you.
And if you could please lower your hand.
Oh, thanks. Well, I appreciate all of the comments that Greg Ziegler and Chief Wunsch have made. I support the idea of naming one of the streets or a portion of Graber Road, the continuation of Graber Road after the Ziegler family. I agree with the chief that all those words probably too much, but perhaps a Johann Ziegler Road or a Ziegler Farm Road could work. I guess where I get tripped up is just knowing that there are glaring exceptions to the concerns that have been raised, such as changing the name of the street right in the middle of the roadway, such as High turning into Park Lawn, and Park and Park Lawn running parallel to one another. Century Avenue has a Century Harbor Road off of it, and also Century Place. And then there's, of course, the Old Middleton Road, Middleton Beach Road, and Middleton Street. And I get that it's easier to avoid these problems when we're creating the streets and naming them at that time. But we do have these examples, and I don't, with the exception of Middleton, the Century ones and the High Road, Park and Park Lawn don't seem to have a historical basis for them. And I think there's a strong argument to be made that the Ziegler family, a lot of the land in my district is now being developed or will be developed, and it used to be owned by the Ziegler family. So I would be in favor of allowing one of the names, not a super long one that has a different prefix. I know our ordinance says that the roads, the name Ziegler Road, Ziegler Way, Ziegler Street, that would be a problem. But if it has a different prefix, to me, it's not the same name. You couldn't make it East Ziegler or South Ziegler, but I do think Johann Ziegler has potential, and I would like to see the committee try to find a way to accommodate the family's request. Thanks.
Okay, Kathy, you are next in line.
Yes, my name is Kathy Zapatokny, and I'm one of the 6 siblings from the Ziegler family. And pretty much my brother Greg and Lisa covered basically everything I was going to mention. I did go and look at the number of homes that are on Ziegler Court. There's 6 homes, and there's 7 homes on Ziegler Lane and Ziegler Court in Cross Plains. So like my brother mentioned, there's only 13 homes that currently do have Ziegler. And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned probabilities, because I happen to be a meteorologist and we deal with probabilities extensively and make a lot of decisions based on probability. So right away, that was kind of the first thing I did, was to look to see how many homes, were affected, or how many people lived on Ziegler Court or Ziegler Road or Ziegler Lane. So that was that first point. And then Lisa pretty much covered what I had done as well as I looked at all the repetition related to high in the city of Middleton, Park in the city of Middleton, Century in the city of Middleton, and then directions like south, north, all of those things that are repeated. And like was mentioned, it's nice to be able to avoid that. But I do think that this is a big exception for the reasons that Greg mentioned, that many farmsteads throughout the city of Middleton and in the area were originally owned by my great-great-grandfather. And, there is a lot of history there. So something, I prefer the Ziegler family farm road, but something that would be a street designation, I think would really be a great, like you mentioned, tribute, but would also be great for the neighborhood. And having grown up on the Ziegler farm, Graber Road has a very industrial connotation, and I could see why Tribeca Drive, why they wanted to change from going from Graber Road to Tribeca, and it totally makes sense that you want to change it when it's going into a residential subdivision versus a commercial. So just to repeat basically what the others have said, I definitely support the changing of Graber Road, even if it has to be a stop sign, as mentioned, to lower the traffic speed on that road to something as it goes into the new subdivision, which would be Ziegler Family Farm Road. And that's all I had, unless you had any questions.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
I just want to make one more point.
Can I,
Okay, sure. I'm sorry.
after Mark's had his turn to
Okay,
speak.
sounds good.
All right. Mark Sundquist, you are recognized.
Okay. I'm the president of National Electrostatics Corporation, which is the building across the road from Graber or Springs. And I would like to point out that we've been there 55 years. We have had hundreds of employees, and we've, as along with Springs, we've been part of the Middleton community. We have 700 customers who know our address. We have probably at least twice as many people who sell things to us. And it's not going to be trivial to teach them all that our names have changed. Address has changed. Plus the fact that when we have a relationship with banks and financial transactions, then it raises suspicions when addresses change, and it's not trivial. So I would suggest that, I'm sure Springs would be in the same problem, but we would be very, very disappointed if the name was changed.
Thank you. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or is that all of your public comment?
Well, I think I just would say, not wanting to take away from the contributions that the Ziegler family has made to Middleton over all the years, or just say that it's been Graber Road for a long time for very good reasons, and changing it would cause quite a bit of inconvenience for the three businesses that currently exist on Graber Road. So that's enough. I've made my.
Sure.
And I'll add to that, Mark, that I had heard earlier this afternoon from Abby Attoon, who's our director of planning and community development, that she had talked with, I think it was Tom Pollock of National Electrostatics. She talked with Adam Nahn of Nahn's Flooring, and she had heard from Jason Bingham of Springs Windows. that they also would all oppose the change of Graber Road, currently addressed to those businesses. What I'm hearing tonight from Greg and from Kathy, I think, isn't changing the name of the existing portion of Graber Road, though that is still on the table as an option. That's not what I'm hearing proposed by the family as much as changing the name of the extension of Graber Road. So, you know, Springs being off the map, but by the time you get to Lynn Street, east of Springs Industries, then stopping Graber Road and starting to call it instead Ziegler Family Farm Road at Lynn Street.
Okay, I was misunderstanding the discussion because the fire chief also, or EMS chief, was suggesting that having the road names change when the road was contiguous was also problematic.
It is. I think in his opinion that was part of what he was saying, and I would tend to agree. If people were approaching on Lynn Street, it might make more sense, but people will by far be approaching on High Road or on Parmenter Street. So even though we have bad examples of street names changing, they tend to change at highways or at least at major roads, not sort of, I would say, mid-block, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, it might be possible to design the intersection so it made the extension of Graber Road seem like another street, just some subtle geometrical change that it looks like Graber, which is quite a wide street, turns to the south, and the new extension of it is enough different that it doesn't look like the same street. That might be something for the engineers to look at.
Without getting into road design, because we're just talking about street names, I would expect that the westerly portion where the businesses are will have a different road feel and look than the portion neighborhood here. Yeah.
So I'd say that we would be very pleased for a different name beginning at the end of the current Graber Road. That would cause us no difficulties whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my sense of the public comments and comments from the city engineer so far is that people are generally, with the exception of Steven, excuse me, people are generally not in favor of any sort of renaming of the area of Graber Road between Lynn Street and Parmenter Street. So as a committee, do we want to just take that off the table before moving forward with discussion of the rest?
I just have a question. I'm just looking at a map in my head. So I mean, obviously right now, Graber Road doesn't go through to High Road.
It's not built. No,
That's
it's
right.
been on our official map.
That's right. And why wouldn't High Road be a better place? A name change.
If it were to continue, that would be a better place for a name change.
Yeah.
So we had
So why,
considered.
why this, what's the name of the road again? Lynn?
Oh, at Lynn Street.
Yeah, why Lynn Street? Because that feeds in from, that'll be a feeder street, is that why?
No, it's just an intersection. It's not really a feeder street as much as a local street. The earlier discussion.
Okay.
Well, let's just change it at the plat boundary,
Right.
basically on this curve.
I'm just thinking, to Mr. Sunquest's, comments there. And by the way, Mr. Sunquest, I grew up in a family business, and Graber Road was a very important road because we sent a lot of vehicles there to do business with Springs. And that business was founded in 1917. So the business road names do mean something. Um, High Road seems like a logical place to consider something. And then also, how do we come up with a name for that subdivision?
Oh, Pheasant Crossing?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's Genesis.
not Ziegler Crossing.
Well, we had originally started, its working title was the Ziegler Farm Plot.
Saying.
Yeah, I know. It was Viridian that made the decision.
Very, okay. I think of like North Lake neighborhood. I don't know. There's no lake there. But it is north.
It might be north of a lake.
There's Orchid Heights. There's no orchids. Are there?
Well, there wasn't. There was acres that had.
Yeah, the
orchids.
acres.
By the acres.
Okay. Right, the acre farm, the acre family.
Yes. Walter Acre.
Yeah, and there is
And
there is a
it-
plaque in front of North Lake that acknowledges that when you enter North.
I hate to. do
Yeah, I'm
this,
sorry.
But I did announce at the beginning of the meeting that we would break at 7:30 and enter a recess for 5 minutes.
Good idea.
So in keeping with that, we will resume discussion at 7:35.
When you were mentioning High Road, did you actually mean the
chatter to a minimum, so we're not driving people crazy, but
You can strike my confusion from the notes regarding High Road. They're completely meaningless.
Carrie, if you could please turn your video back on.
when available.
All right, so the time is now 7:35. Members present.
Quick. Let's give Garrett a chance here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she has her video on.
Okay.
All right, the time is now 7:35. Members present, Don and Carrie remotely. Present in the room are Kim, Dave, and Charles. A quorum of 5 is here. The meeting is called back into order. So we were in the process of discussing the name of the extension of Gray River Road. And I believe, remembering correctly, Dave, you just made a comment regarding.
Yes, to clarification. So I looked at a map.
Yeah.
And I was way off on High Road. So my comment regarding High Road and where roads are, just my bad. So scratch that as in.
So for reference.
Thank you for the correction, Greg.
For reference, Graver Road right now is built only to just past Lynn Street.
Yeah.
And then we had just officially mapped it out to High Road and across, even though that's not feasible. So it'll end up terminating at High Road per the layout in the current plat, although it doesn't quite match the layout of the official map.
Yeah, thank you. Now I understand the logic behind the Lynn Street, so. Gotcha. Thank you.
So while we were all talking during this, I pulled up Access Dane just to check all the street names in Dane County. The Ziegler roads, courts, and lane and drive that are mentioned in Sean's memo are all of the Ziegler streets in Dane County. There are no streets named Johann in Dane County.
Oh.
And you know, I was thinking for a moment, just with my hat as a landmarks commissioner in Middleton, because it is important for us to remember our history, and this committee did vote generally broadly in support of historic preservation in, I believe, April of last year when it was on the agenda, potentially March. I was thinking, you know, maybe in terms of if name is the issue, Johann's farm might be something that would not pop up. And I've also checked for any conflicts. There are no Johann's farm. There are no streets with Johann in all of Dane County. And just sort of in the interest of making sure that, you know, we do recognize the history, if we are open to that stretch and we're sensitive to not wanting to have a name which could potentially be confused by a distressed caller, because you don't call the emergency response number unless you're in a fair amount of distress and you're gonna throw out an identifiable word. And my concern is if we did, you know, Johann Ziegler, they might just say, oh, I'm on Ziegler, because everyone tends to immediately go to a last name. So I was thinking maybe if we decide that we're open to another name, that there might be a way to do this where we emphasize your great grandfather's first name and that it was his farm. Is that something that preserves the value of what you're looking at in terms of remembering your family's historic ties to the land?
Yes, I think so. And I was going to mention before that we're talking hundreds of families, if not thousands, that exist now in Middleton from Johann. So
Yeah.
you'd make a lot of people happy.
And that's actually what I was wondering is who would know what the significance of Johann as a name is if it were dissociated. So for instance, I live on Donna Drive, but I'm willing to bet few people know who Donna was. And it wasn't very long ago. And that becomes sort of the question is what is its historical significance when it's a person's first name?
And see, that's where the other part of my comment comes in. The Landmarks Commission, on which I am a member. And I think based on the commission's interests, we have, and I'm not speaking for my other commissioners right now. But I do know that we have in the past discussed wanting to place more historical markers around the city of Middleton, recognizing the history of Middleton. And there was some concern during that discussion that we would just be clustering them in one area. So maybe we have Johann's farm way or road or something that differentiates it, and then we ask the Landmarks Commission to get involved and place a marker at that intersection. But of course, it would be up to them to do that. But I'm just trying to look for a way where we can make sure that we're representing the history of the land as well.
It might be easier for me to circle back and first address the issue of does the committee support changing a name of a street, of a collector street, partway between two other collector streets? I think that's probably an important first question because that sets whether this is continuing as Graber or not as Graber. And then a second question is if we want to entertain a name that has not yet been proposed, could we allow that as a substitute maybe for a different street? So
that was, I guess, my question was are we only talking about the possibility of renaming that stretch of what would be Graber Road, or can we change the name of another street in the subdivision that would honor your family and the commitment there and recognize that, as well as keep Graber Road contiguous as Graber Road? Like, is there somewhere else in the plat that change could be made where kind of everybody gets a little bit of something?
well, and that along those lines, we just very recently did because the developer came back and said, yeah, let's, instead of this road we've been calling it as a working draft, what if we just change it to Ruth Road instead? And I looked it up and it doesn't violate anything in our ordinance. And then I can just say, sure, we'll call it Ruth Road then, before it's final platted. We can do that. So if somebody wants to propose a name that does meet our ordinance, we can do that at staff. We don't even need a committee for that.
I guess I would prefer that Graber Road name be changed in the subdivision because of the idea of lessening the industrial sound of it.
And I guess from my perspective, I haven't been here for nearly as long, right? And in the 15 years that I have lived here, when I hear Graber, I think pond. And not industry, right? And as we have more people that are enjoying that aspect of Graber, I think the industrial nature of the name is lessened over time. And so that's, for me, not Like I didn't even think of that as an industrial name, like, oh, because I hear Graber, I think pond.
Well, I mean, to change their name to Springs, it probably made some difference.
I guess having lived there for 20 some odd years, we smelled the fumes from
Sure,
Gravers.
sure.
And, the noise and stuff like that. So that is pretty ingrained.
No, I imagine so.
Kathy, I believe you have your hand raised. You're recognized.
Yes, if you're looking for suggestions, I think, since Johann was the grandfather for us, something like Johann's, I don't know, it would be nice to get Ziegler in there. And I don't know, I know that you guys said that people would gravitate to that. I'm just not sure. Just trying to, because I think Ziegler is such an important name. I mean, adding Johann is what would differentiate it from the other Zieglers. So that would be my comment related to the naming. And like Greg had mentioned, it just seems natural, or it is like a natural break going from a commercial industrial area to a residential area, that it would be a natural break where a name could change. And so those are just my comments.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of circles. Do we as a committee advocate changing a street name between two sort of ends of that street name?
I don't know if I'm copying out, but sometimes things this public like this, I like to punt them to a common council. I'm okay with the street name. Yeah, it's tough.
I'm not. I really think that that's not, I don't see that as big a natural break. And I feel like if you were traveling through Middleton or going from one place to the other, that changing the fact that Park and Hyatt Street change names, like if we were looking at an intersection like the one you pointed out at Middleton and Terrace, where it's a pretty sharp turn where Middleton Street turns into Terrace Avenue.
Yeah.
That's a little different. That's because they're going in two totally different directions. This is, like you said, kind of a sweeping curve of a road. And as far as directionality and ease of access and keeping things consistent, it does not feel like a different stretch of road now that just because it's going into a residential area, it's gonna be the same connector street. And I just don't feel comfortable changing the name of the road in the middle of a road. I absolutely support landmark usage markers, changing the street name within the plat to recognize the family. I think that's really important. And I'm glad you're advocating for that. I just don't think it's a good idea to change the name of the road.
How about the aspect of, that is such a sweeping curve that it's going to encourage speeding and commuter traffic.
Yeah, well, and we can definitely talk about that in the context of plat changes, right? But that's not what we're discussing tonight.
Yeah, that would be out of bounds.
Yeah, that's at that point, we're not talking about the name anymore. So do we want to kick this to council without endorsement or recommendation, or without endorsement or opposition? Do we have somebody who wants to make a motion endorsing staff position? Do we have somebody who wants to make a motion endorsing a change to that specific area? Or do we have someone who wants to make a motion supporting a change to a different road in the subdivision to be decided at staff level to Johann Ziegler or Johann's farm?
Could we hold off on the naming and,
Name to be determined later. Yeah, we can.
no, I meant, to address the structure of the road first and then deal with the naming aspect at another time.
Well, until then, part of what I'm looking at is, I know the developer and developer's engineer have said that they intend to turn in a final plat. That final plat is gonna have a street name on Graber Road. If nothing else changes, it's gonna look pretty much like that, and it's gonna be called Graber Road. So that's another piece of the puzzle, is I know the developer wants to move forward with a final plat. And if we're gonna defer this and come back to the committee and then potentially the council, that's gonna be another, I'll say, solid month before that's determined. And so it drives that a little bit too.
Ezra, I'm just thinking in terms of efficiency, to get the name resolved. That's why goes to council. Council can say yea or nay on the road. You can move ahead with your plat.
I would hope that
I
the
think-
council wants some advice from this committee.
I was just gonna say the same thing, Sean. We're a public works committee, so I feel like we should put a recommendation forward. And my recommendation would be to keep it as Graber Road. I agree with your assessment, Sean.
So Carrie, you want to make that motion?
Sure, I'll be the I didn't mean to say that so strongly, in that like I understand all the concerns. So I just want to make sure that you all know that I've heard you. But I do just think that hearing all the considerations, and again weighing all the factors, I would like to make the motion to not support the request to change the name. Is that clear
What
enough,
about-
or should I say to keep it Graber Road?
What about wording into your request? Okay, keep the road Graber Road. However, we would like a referral to the Landmarks Commission for the proposal of some kind of development, something in the subdivision that acknowledges Ziegler family. How can we?
So we only did notice the name, so that might be a little bit, if we're referring it, might just
I
be.
was gonna say maybe that could be a separate motion,
Okay,
just to kind of keep it clean. But
And I
I
would-
like that idea.
Yeah, separate motion.
So for now, we just have a motion from Carrie that the committee support the city engineer's recommendation not to change the name of the planned extension of Graber Road.
I'll
Correct.
second that. Don, seconds?
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, at the risk of extending, Carrie, would you be willing in this motion to include that we're open to a different road being named in the event that the city engineer approves of the name?
To be fair, we would not need committee support for that. If the ordinance supports it, I can just do
Okay,
that.
all right, yeah, then never mind. I'll withdraw that. All right, motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now, I think the way, because we only really did notice discussion of the name. So of that street, so referring to landmarks might be a little bit out of bounds, but I am a landmarks commissioner. I can send an email. So I will do that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm gonna bring. Oh, Don, you had something?
Well, I'm concerned about sending it to landmarks. First of all, why doesn't the developer do something like that? Why does the city have to pay for that? There's no plaque that said this is Middleton Hills that the city paid for. There's no plaque that says North Lake that the city paid for. I mean, it just seems odd to me that you would even think landmarks would be able to fund something like that. But you're the chair, so you can go ahead.
At that point, we're definitely out of discussing the Platt
I
Street.
agree. Yep, I agree. That's why stop talking.
Okay, so thank you, and thank you to everyone who joined us remotely for this agenda item. I don't think there's any further discussion on it. So with that, we are on to use of leading pedestrian intervals at traffic signals.
Agenda here. So we have. Overshot. So we have Noah Leonard with us this evening from SRF, who's our traffic consultant. They do a lot of our TIA work and signal analysis, progression studies, that sort of thing, anything about traffic really. And so we tasked them with looking into leading pedestrian interval programming at 17 traffic signals under the city's jurisdiction. And it turned out to be a pretty heavy lift. Who knew? I think the way it actually had been proposed to me was, oh, just do it. So we pumped the brakes a little bit and said, let's look at what we're doing. And then SRF did everything after that. So we have the letter report. They did a lot of investigation, opening cabinets, looking at programming, looking at hardware, talking to TAPCO, which is our material supplier for signal equipment, the age of some of our stuff, and put together a series of recommendations about what we could do at the pretty low end, fairly easy implementation, which is 2 of our controllers, and then what would not be recommended or could be used as guidance as we're updating signal controllers. So we have those answers now, and when I go astray here, just reel me in, but the overall, see ya, Greg, thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
And Kathy, thank you for your input too. So the short answer is at the intersection of Allen Boulevard and Maywood Avenue, which is not too far from Harbor Athletic, right? And at the intersection of Airport and Nursery. Boy, there isn't much in the way of landmark there, but the airport, southeast corner of the airport, I'll call it, right? You know, those 2 places would lend themselves to leading pedestrian interval timings. I doubt that we have a high number of pedestrians at Airport and Nursery, but it's something we could program in there.
I have to look on a map. Is that where, that's not the one that's on the bike path or leads to it?
It's a sidewalk.
So, yeah,
This is west of the bike path, the Highway 12 bike path, did you mean? Yeah, this is west of that. That's a DOT signal.
Okay.
Right at the belt line. So not under our jurisdiction. We're more by, like the Lauren Imhoff home repair business.
Yep.
Right at the corner of Nursery Drive. So that's kind of it. And then the rest of them, I've already passed a couple notes off for like Century Avenue and Branch Street, because when we rebuild the bridge, the county rebuilds the bridge with us as partners, we'll be rebuilding that intersection. So we can look at a signal upgrade at that point. And that would be much more heavily used, a better place for it if we could pull that off. And then I passed a note along to Strand Associates, who's working right now on a design of signal upgrades at Century and Allen, Century and Q, and then also putting in some equipment right here at University in Parmenter. We already have the equipment here. We just haven't been able to find anybody to put it in. So I have notes off on that stuff to use this report as guidance. So really what's before us tonight is any questions that the committee might have about the report. I'll push straight to Noah and stay out of it. But other than that, the upshot is to accept the traffic signal study that we have in our packets. And then I would suggest leaving it as requesting staff actions to implement LPI programming at the two intersections that could be fairly easily done. Because we'll want to coordinate that with TAPCO when they're around and avoid a service charge. This is not in a huge hurry. And especially, I mean, the committee might even want to think a little bit more about whether it's worth any money at airport and nursery, just because pedestrian activity there is pretty low. So maybe questions first. If there's anything about the report, any technical issues with the report?
Sean, based on the report, would there be a plan to come up with a plan for some of these other intersections, like, you know, Century and High, Century and Donna? Let's see, others that are probably critical in the city. I mean, we had that incident at Century and High, which clearly, you know, excited a couple of people, and, you know, so if we did something there, and what, you know, at least plan for it.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this attachment one, this recommendations map with just a really, really high level sort of guidance for what we might want to look at as our low hanging fruit versus maybe abandon all hope kind of things. Right. And so I think the way this will work is we'll have to look at this sort of in a budget priority way for staff to look at, to say, you know, do you want to try to check off all the green stuff before starting the yellow stuff? Or do we want to look at jumping in on some of the yellow stuff to say, but we've got higher interest here. So even if it costs more, let's do that first. That becomes more of a policy level issue with city input, probably more so than SRF direction.
You know, I hate to say it, but Century and Donna slant, Frank Lloyd Wright is really a heavily used pedestrian intersection, always, all directions.
Yeah.
Even more so than High Street. But, and that's obviously red. But
I cross there pretty often. Somebody put a grocery store across from my house. So
yeah, right.
what were they thinking?
Anyway, that, and then again, the fact that we had the one incident at High Road obviously would be important, but yeah, at least start budgeting some of these intersections would be good in the future, so we can show that we're doing something.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, and we have some traffic signal components that are really pretty aged. And that's part of what's been driving our replacements of some of those things anyhow, is to say, you know, University and Parmenter is just plain old. So is Century and Allen. You know, and so, well, and it doesn't work.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
was it like Century and Q, you know, it's a high, there's a lot of apartments
Yep.
and dense living in that area.
Yeah,
Small retail at the corners there and school bus, busy
Exactly.
area. I mean, maybe we can,
there's also a daycare in that general area too.
you know,
Yep, with staff who walk,
so going after, I can see, you know, going after low hanging fruit if. Oh, if the money's there, I mean, do you go after the low hanging ones just to get them done and out of the way? Because, I mean, do we do, you know, 4 low hanging ones and then budget for the more costly ones, but are more, have more foot traffic? I mean, kind of what's your thinking in that?
Yeah, the way I had been looking at it prior to diving into this, and who knew it would be complicated, but the way I had been looking at it is, let's get some of our really old stuff out of our system
Oh.
before it breaks.
Yeah.
You know, because that seemed significant. You know, and LPI seemed like, well, that could be of benefit. But it's still better, I think, on balance than something that just stops working. And then it's an emergency repair or replacement instead of something you've been able to plan for.
so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the Ped Bike and Transit Committee. They are certain to have very strong opinions about the order of priority and probably pretty well-informed ones as well, since it's their committee's job. And I know from my conversations with Tad that he is, and that whole committee, and Carrie, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that area around Greenway is an area of pretty intense concern for Ped Bike and Transit, those two intersections. If I'm remembering correctly and not confusing them with a different intersection, but I think if I'm remembering, there were some driveways there, and then there was the Costco driveway up on Deming that committee had concerns about. Is that ringing a bell, or am I misremembering?
I know, I'm trying to remember. I think that sounds right.
Costco doesn't.
I
So,
think the
Yeah.
Costco driveway
Yeah,
issue was
Costco's-
about
I think-
the path.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's about,
that was a
yeah.
pinch point or conflict point,
yeah,
and outside of
Like drivers don't stop at the stop.
Yeah, they
sign.
don't stop.
correct.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I could have sworn I also remembered something about Greenway in there in that discussion as well, but I
I
can't.
remember green paint being talked about.
That could also. But I think that we'd probably be well served to refer this over to Ped Bike and Transit for their assessment of which intersections they see as the biggest priorities. And then we can look at it and figure out.
Is there a timeline to this?
Well, I would suggest then we can still approve the report.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, yeah, we can approve the report. Yeah,
And then just send it over to PBTC for advice on implementation. I'd be
Yeah.
okay with that.
I'll make that motion, Sean. We approve the report and pass it on to Ped Bike and Transit for their review and prioritizing.
I'll second that motion.
all right. We have a motion from Don. We have a second from Kim. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Noah, thank you.
yeah, the recommendations map this was great.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh.
that's great.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
I would like to just throw out there, so with the work we've done for you all in the past, at least since COVID, I think I have every single one of those intersections of turning movement counts and pedestrian counts somewhere in our file drives.
Oh,
So
I
if
thought
that
you
is
were gonna say memorized.
probably
that
pretty
too.
close. So if that is of interest to either this committee or
Yeah.
Peck Transit, to have those numbers, we'd be happy to send those over. Sean probably has them in a concoction of 8 to 12 different emails, but I can summarize them all together.
That'd be cool.
That would be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Oh,
That would be
Yes.
amazing. Yeah, please do.
Because I think ultimately as well, again, looking at this map in the previous discussion with the curb bump outs and the raised median or the raised crosswalks, I think it's outlined in this report, but just a piece of consideration is that if you look to implement these, think about them in clusters. So the university cluster of 4 right there, if you were to implement LPI at 2 of those and not at the other 2, it could potentially mislead drivers. And so that's something we kind of wanted to identify in this report.
Mhm.
Again, with the Greenway, if you did it at one and not the other, it'd be odd. Now Q is a whole different corridor because that sort of ebbs and flows. You go
Yeah.
from Boulevard to, tight 4-lane back to Boulevard. So a little bit more leeway there, but particularly that, again, with the school on University there, just thinking about that cluster, kind of thinking about it as a unit, is something that we wanted to kind of highlight as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. Not just driver expectation, but pedestrian expectation, like, where's the button?
Yep.
It's like, but where am I?
Charles, one other thing to consider here, and it's not by approving the report and passing it on, but maybe we'll do it in our next meeting, but set an annual budget for doing this work, because I think the committee is pretty set on the fact that it's important. But if we established a budget, at least then we could pick these intersections or that one per year and get something going on it.
Would you like to move to request that staff create a budget line item in the budget for 2026 for implementing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the hard part might be done, in conjunction with somebody setting prioritization preference. And in conjunction with what Noah just said about trying to group certain things, we're gonna get pretty highly variable numbers.
Oh, I agree. And it'll be inflated every year, and it's a swag at this point, but at least get a line item there so it can be prioritized annually as we do the budget.
Right, so I would feel pretty comfortable even if they said, yeah, this one at Frank Lloyd Wright is just a very high priority, let's get it on the board. And maybe we want to do that and High Road at the same time, but this one's getting done in 27 anyway. This is on the board now. This we could do at any given time. So, maybe they'll say, well, let's look at these 2, and then let's look at these 4, and then let's look at these 2. And we can deal with that thing.
Okay, I'll pull back the motion, but I at least get a line item on the budget for it.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea. Otherwise, it'll get forgotten, and that's worse yet. So
Yeah.
we'll have a report on a shelf. Saddest thing ever.
And
It'll get forgotten.
yeah, so and Noah, thank you again for your offer to share the data in one place. I know our committee and Ped Bike Transit will find that incredibly helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. All right, next item on the agenda, resolution 2025-03, releasing city interest in a portion of a public utility easement at the Greenway Mixed Use Redevelopment 8309 Greenway Boulevard, PC 2645.
Yeah. This has been on the interest of, well, there's that redevelopment of the old ponds buildings that's turning into a multi-use, largely residential development at John Q. Hammond's and Greenway Boulevard. And there's an old, in fact, it's so old, we got right-of-way notched out over the top of what's a public utility easement now, largely in right-of-way, and then we vacated part of the right-of-way. And it gets a little bit crazy to have an easement in right-of-way mostly. But they have some interest in having us at least release our easement rights in this portion of the public utility easement. We don't have any facilities in it anyway. I think the biggest one would have been MG&E, and I think they're working with them anyway to relocate their stuff. So we went back and forth on this for quite a long time at the staff level, and in the end, ended up supporting it because we didn't have any particular driving reason not to. I'm still not entirely sure what it means for the city to give up its interests in a public utility easement, because any utility has interests in it. But if, as the developer, they want to acquire all of those releases individually, it's fine with me. We can at least give up our interest in it. So that's why this is here. And the recommendation would be for the Common Council to approve the resolution as drafted by the city attorney to affect the city's release of its interests in this public utility easement.
I'll move to recommend to council that Common Council approve the release of the city's rights in the portion of the public utility easement per the resolution drafted by the city attorney.
I'll second that motion.
Motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. On to agenda item number 7, resolution 2025-04, granting underground and overhead electric easement to Madison Gas and Electric Co. at 6409 Elmwood Ave, WU-105. Sean.
Yeah, and this is a city-owned lot. And MG&E had approached us with a proposal to get a 6-foot wide electric easement outside the right-of-way on our land, and it's in conjunction with a much bigger undergrounding plan that they're pursuing. But we also have an interest in upgrading the electrical service on that lot. And so we're going to need some work on our land anyway. And so for them to coordinate their work with our work ends up with something better for both of us. So as staff, we support this with the recommendation to council again.
Is there any discussion? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the staff recommendation to and send it to Common Council.
Norton, second.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, agenda item number 8, Orchid Heights street lighting 73-101.
Sure how I ended up with this in everyone's way, but sorry, it's chewing up your screens at home. This is revisiting an issue previously talked about, but had deferred after talking about it at some length. But in the meantime, too, I've changed my staff recommendation, which had been let's make sure the neighbors are interested, or at least enough neighbors are interested before we spend staff time moving forward. And I do think it's fair from the previous discussion first to try to get a ballpark cost estimate so neighbors have an idea what they're looking at before going with that. So, so first, I think it would be fair for the committee to ask me to ask MG&E to pull together a ballpark cost of what it would take to put street lighting in, and by street lighting, I just went back to an old drawing that has all these red dots on it to see, well, what would it cost to build that up? And then for the neighbors to be able to consider that, divide by however many they think are applicable. And in the meantime, as I was looking more into this, in 2015, I didn't recall this, but Alder Lorman mentioned it to me. We built these streetlights with direction from the Public Works Committee at city expense. So these were capitally approved streetlights with a project when we were redoing part of Valley Ridge Road resurfacing. I think we upgraded the sewer force main and resurfaced the road at the time. And the Public Works Committee discussion at that time was the land use adjacent to this portion of Valley Ridge Road is so different from the rest of the subdivision that we couldn't expect, these businesses, these folks to put on yard lights because they're effectively condos or businesses or whatever, like the rest of the subdivision had been tasked with doing, and that it just had a different traffic profile than the rest of the subdivision. So they specifically said, let's not extend that up the rest of this road project. That was a while ago. That was going on 10 years ago now. So it's possible too that the impression of that has changed. So I wanted to throw that out there as something information-wise we did not have at our last discussion.
John, I remember this topic. I think I was on the committee then. So I
Yeah, you were.
remember- Yeah, I remember this. And
God bless your memory, I didn't.
yeah, yeah. And I remember there was there was a lot of neighbors that were really strongly opposed to having lighting. They really liked this to be like the dark, what do you call that? Dark Emily.
Dark skies.
Yes, yes. They were really, yes, they wanted this to be that. So I'm just curious if what the current status of that still is. I mean, I recall that we were open to adding the lighting, but it was because of the strong opposition that we didn't move forward with it.
Motion to add it, but that motion was defeated or not seconded, and I'm not sure which.
Oh, to continue down Valley Ridge.
Just for the road project, yeah, Valley
Yeah.
Ridge alone, but it specifically did not pass. And I don't know the reasoning, Carrie, that's a good point. Is it if in the background the neighbors were opposed to it, or it just didn't get support?
Well, you see, what you have on Valley Ridge is you have Pheasant Branch Conservancy,
Yeah.
which is the backyard there. So, I'm just wildly speculating, but then lighting up all the way down Valley, Valley Ridge, I suppose can impede aspects of the darkness of the Conservancy.
I think maybe what we do is we move forward to have this discussion with real numbers, or at least give the residents a chance to talk about it with real numbers, and then we can
Sure, I'd
get into the weeds.
Yeah, happy to make a motion to, I guess, instruct city staff to pursue electric infrastructure, MGE.
Consistent with this plan.
consistent with that plan
Okay.
of drafted in 2015.
And then with the neighbors to weigh in, or just get it back to the committee, period?
Well, no, I mean,
Let's have the neighbors weigh in.
yeah, we have to get the neighbor.
Yeah.
It's still an HOA in theory, so we still have to have neighbors.
I thought that had dissolved.
I thought the HOA had dissolved.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well from.
Well, I mean, there's no active HOA, but the covenant still exists, right? As you stated in your previous historical documents.
There were covenants. I didn't know if when the HOA dissolved, the covenants would just go with it.
I mean, there's obviously no documentation that shows it formally ever being dissolved, but the fact of the matter is that all the residents who live in Orchid Heights still have their lights on outside, and no one has come along and said to them, hey, you can turn off your lamp post in front of your house.
Oh.
Right? Because that still is on the books, that neighborhood was designed with that in mind. I'm just guessing based on the historical documents that you provided, that the neighborhood was built in 1968 with the understanding that there would be no streetlights and residents would have streetlights in front, lamp posts in front of their house. That hasn't changed, right? With or without an HOA. And so if a resident doesn't have a lamp on, the city doesn't have a way to enforce it unless they would decide to. So, I mean, that's where we stand.
Yeah, that's the thing with covenants, is the HOA has to pursue it.
And
if they don't.
And by city getting a cost estimate to do this project, then we go, the next question would be, is the city going to assess the residents a fee to put lighting in, or is the city not? So that would be the next thing in front of this body at some point.
And if we didn't have a leaning, I bet that would affect answers. So if we don't know that before asking people to sign a petition or their sort of document, they'll say, well, that's nice that it costs X.
What's it gonna cost me?
Do I have to pay for it?
Well, and the other thing is obviously, impacting, the idea of dark skies versus people wanting a lit neighborhood. So we're going to want public input on that no matter what.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure if they'll answer the question the same both ways. It's a two-part question, like, would you want lighting if you had to pay for it?
That's
Or
right.
would you want lighting if the taxpayers paid for it?
And I think I think there's 3 parts. First, do you want lighting?
Yeah.
Second, do you want it if you have to pay for it?
Right.
So
Or would you just want the taxpayers to pay for
Yeah.
it? In which
Well,
case, still want it.
If the taxpayers are paying for it, it'll probably be a lot easier answer for them, but in any new subdivision, the developer pays for street lighting, correct?
Correct, and that's why it's always just assumed that it was built into the lot prices way back when.
So therefore, I think it would be an assessment to those homeowners to put in this lighting. I don't know why the city would even think of paying.
Would we assess it based on 1968 cost structures?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, exactly, Don. That's why in the past, when it's come up, we've always looked at it as Public Works Committee as an accessible project, other than these 4 specifically were not put in with assessments. So that opened the door again.
And then it opens the door, and people start getting into the whole argument. Well, but what about the streets on Century Avenue and Elm Boulevard and, all these other main thoroughfares? And well, I mean, and people do live on those streets, right? But I'm sure the city paid for that, the developer.
Well, the really major ones were put in by the county.
The county. So, then we're just really starting to get down such a rabbit hole of a.
Sure.
I think the reality is for the people who live in Orchid Heights is, one, do you or do you not want streetlights? 2, are you willing to pay for it?
Yeah.
Right, well, and they need a general cost assessment to
Yep.
be able to do that, so that's what we're.
Yeah.
Have to ask MGE.
Yeah, so they can have.
Yeah,
those
and based on this, Sean, do you think,
Yeah.
just hypothetically, maybe things change, maybe the lights would have to be in different places or different numbers than what's on here, but that wouldn't be a significant factor to help get a baseline, would it?
Yeah, I don't view this as sort of the construction document as much as a basis for asking what it would cost. And if someone says, you know what, this one, take that out. Okay, well, the cost is almost the same, but we could take it out.
Sure, because you have to put the electrical wiring in to get to the next one
Yeah,
down
Yeah.
but
so
I
it's-
could appreciate, I mean, sometimes people just don't want a light in front of their house.
Yep.
They do want one in front of their neighbor's house.
Well, and being a resident of that neighborhood, of that street where your mouse is, it'll be interesting.
I hear you're volunteering to have it in front of your house.
There are interesting people in this neck of the woods.
It's pretty interesting, even within a household, how opinions
Oh,
go. Yeah. No, who would have thunk it? Yeah, this was brought to me by some constituents in the Orchid Heights neighborhood, and so here we are, carrying it through.
All right, so
So, Sean, do you need a motion to have you proceed to go to MG&E and get a budget?
I think I made the motion.
yeah, so
Yeah.
Dave made that motion.
I will
Okay.
second.
all right. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
I,
Aye. All right,
Any opposed?
none opposed, all voted aye. I
Wait.
believe. Oh, wait, Carrie, did you?
I tried to get unmuted. I am in favor.
Yeah, I thought I heard your voice.
I thought I didn't. That's why I humped the brakes.
Gotcha, yeah. All right. Okay, so motion carries unanimously. Next on our agenda, discussion of liaison appointments. And this is from 11:25. I believe that this is on the L&O agenda tomorrow.
it is, and I was
So-
gonna ask if we can go ahead and put it up so that we as a committee can look at it. And if we as a committee say, yes, I think that those changes are good and appropriate, then I feel comfortable supporting it in L&O.
I mean, just full disclosure, I planned on going to that L&O meeting to register my support for having the committee decide its liaison appointments, which I believe is the format that you've
Yes.
selected.
Oh, I'm a little behind on things.
Okay, so, Sean,
I glanced at the L&O agenda, but to be fair, I was looking mostly at the special event permit stuff. Yeah, and then got on with my day, so.
yeah, so, Kim, my understanding of this ordinance, if I'm reading it correctly, as it's proposed, is that the liaison appointments from Public Works will go from 4 separate processes for 3 appointments to 1, which is that the Public Works Committee recommends its liaisons to the various committees.
Yes,
And
As opposed to being the chair or designee,
yeah,
but not like when you say that the committee chooses, you're not saying, well, the committee may choose to have no liaisons or 16 liaisons, just how to do it.
yeah,
Right.
here, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's, let's see, I'll just.
I was gonna say,
Yeah. 1 member recommended by the Public Works Committee from the membership of that committee.
All right.
Is
Yeah.
what they drafted.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. As chair, it was well, all of you were with me through at least one liaison appointment session, and it is actually something that I think we've all at some point complained about during the appointment process, that we have 4 processes for 3 spots. One of those processes, of course, is if no one on the committee is voluntold by the committee, that the chair sits on that committee. So I think it'll be good for the entire committee to be involved in that decision-making process.
Yeah, and it sounds like then that's for all committees, like there's a way to do
Right, there's
this.
a way to do it.
Right.
Yes, because we are not the only committee with this particular problem.
Good.
There are, Plan has this problem, Water Resources Management has this problem, Parks, Rec, and Forestry has this problem, Aging has this problem. So it'll be good to have one standardized process.
I agree. It's always been confusing, even just writing the agenda for how we're gonna pull this off. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I actually remember you correcting me during one of them, because I'd gotten my processes switched around.
Right?
Yeah.
For an
How can you
appointment. And so,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, does everyone, I mean, it's kind of going to the second part of that, does everyone feel like there really is a need for liaisons to other committees? And the reason I ask is because it's, you know, these meetings are all available for us to watch. All of the minutes are available for us to have access to. We know that if there's something that is on our agenda that would need to be consulted, that, you know, hey, we've got all of those resources, right? We don't necessarily need to have somebody report back. However, it is nice to kind of know what's going on in all of those other committees, because we can't keep up with 800
Yes.
different meetings, right? That's a lot of committees to follow.
And even if you did watch the video and read the minutes, maybe not everybody on the committee did. And so it's
Right.
wonderful to have someone like Harry and say, you know what, could you just remind us what's going on with
Yeah.
PBTC?
Mhm.
And clearly there's an organic connection where some committees are gonna have that working together relationship, because what one does impacts the other, just so there's a logic there to it.
Yeah, I think it does I think it makes sense as well, just because the liaison is there and they can represent the viewpoint to an extent of the committee they're representing. Just, you know, we haven't voted on it in Public Works, but of course, you know, I know the thinking of my fellow Public Works committee members to
Sure. generally
go along these lines. And these are the concerns they're going to raise. And so that's, you know, useful to have for cross-committee communication purposes.
Excellent.
I was never as sure about Conservancy Lands Committee. Do you feel that you're bringing public works stuff to them? Because I don't feel like usually we're getting CLC stuff brought to us like, oh, we need to pay attention to this.
It's been infrequent. However, insofar as Public Works cares about stormwater, there was the meeting while Brandon was on Conservancy Lands, where they were discussing water runoff from artificial turf
Oh,
versus grass.
Sure.
On one of the fields that was being
The softball diamond at the
Yeah.
high school.
And at our last meeting, there wasn't really anything where Public Works had too much of anything that we particularly care about, but it does come up, and it is, I think,
There's a
use-
cross benefit.
Yeah, it's useful to just have a person in the room because like, it's one of those things where, if it comes up and it's something that we care about, it's usually something we really do care about, just given the nature of the conservancy.
Sure.
And that's probably why we have the liaison in the first place.
Yeah, I just didn't know.
Really, I haven't looked into the history of how that liaison.
If you look at other maybe historical projects. Going way back, but there was, I think it was sewer main placement and development. And it was what portions of it were slated to go through the conservancy, but there was quite a lot of input from conservancy back to the city. And I think some people saying, no. And so yeah, and it got like moved to the other side of the road, literally. Because it didn't want the sewer going underneath or near the conservancy. I mean, so maybe there's a cycle to it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that committee does feel like a committee where like the overwhelming majority of the meetings, neither committee really cares too much what the other is doing because they don't have as many overlapping responsibilities. But for that one meeting a year, where there's something that comes up, they do have overlapping responsibilities, and they're overlapping responsibilities that both committees care about a lot. So I think it's useful, as the person currently serving as liaison, I think it's useful to keep around just for that purpose.
Sure.
But we might want to recognize the very limited purpose that serves. But it's an important one. It's like, let's be realistic. It's, that one meeting a year where interests need to be vigorously represented cross committee.
Like a dark skies discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just don't. And so hey, who would have thought it?
Whereas Don's liaison role, we definitely, that is.
Yeah.
Well, I think, mine with water resources, I think it's vital that the two
Yeah.
committees have a common person in there somewhere, because
Sure.
they're both dealing with a lot of construction, and, we're gonna put another culvert under Donna Drive somewhere. Well, I think maybe Public Works ought to know about that. They're not, by the way, but just as an example.
I think Public Works ought to know about that.
I almost think maybe we merge that liaison position, Don, give you another committee. Because where conservancy lands intersects with us is usually going to be where we intersect with your committee that you liaise with. So
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. Yeah, well, stormwater for sure, but I do remember that discussion about the stormwater pipes through the conservancy, mainly because I worked for the engineering firm that was trying to do it at the time.
Right. Yes.
Well, so it sounds like we don't really need a motion on this.
no, I don't think we need a motion, but let's just generally as a sense of the committee say that we support standardization of the committee of the appointment process, and that we are grateful to LNO for doing this after 2 years of Public Works saying
No. Be nice.
no, it was 2 years. It came up in my very first meeting for appointments. Remember this, Tom?
At the pace of government.
Yes, and we are grateful to LNO, so thank you.
We meet tomorrow.
I'll be there, I think. All right. Great. So with that, liaison briefings with no discussion or action. Nothing of relevance from the last CLC meeting that I attended. All right, Carrie.
She's on mute.
You're muted, Carrie.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mute tonight. None. I don't have any updates.
I'm glad you unmuted for that. That's good. Water resources, I don't think we've had a meeting in, well, a couple of months, and we're not having one again this month, so no report.
About that, yeah.
All right, future meeting agenda items. Carrie,
Nothing.
Don,
Nothing.
Kim,
Nothing.
Dave.
I've used my quota for the year.
Wow, it's January.
I know. Exactly. I promise. Nothing wrong.
Sean, we discussed that one that I want to add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be done during a meeting like ever.
Yeah,
People can suggest items whenever.
so that one, and also a thank you meeting or a thank you agenda item for Sean to be added sometime in February.
Oh,
I was gonna say, you've been doing that for 30 years.
yeah, but this way it can be a public, open discussion.
Yes.
Oh, that's all I need.
I mean, we really dig in.
Be like, yeah, are you inviting Dean Martin?
That's right.
Gonna be in
It'll
trouble.
be a roast.
Yeah, for our second meeting in February.
I'll bring a roast.
Yeah.
Wait, is your last day's not until April, right? Or is it February now?
It's not really set. I had mentioned a target of handing stuff over in April, right? Late April. But you always have some vacation time to take off, and one of my real interests is making sure there's somebody as the director in the chair that can ask me questions before I'm gone, because it would be terribly unfair to just sit down and hope for the best. So I want.
Sean, you'll have to get a cell phone.
What's that?
You'll have to get a cell phone.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, I'd rather just show up. So I don't know, it's a little bit flexible.
Got it.
Yeah, so so we'll schedule that for the second meeting in February.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
I'm writing that down right now.
Yeah. All right, with that, we have reached the end of our noticed agenda. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and thank you, George, for joining us for the entire meeting. Right.
Bye,
See
everyone.
you all in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Yep.
Bye.
Not me. I'll be on a cruise ship. Sorry, everybody.
Really?
Ooh.
Oh.